Thanks very much for speaking with us, Dr. Godwin. It's nice to have you here today. I just want to ask you, first of all, how did you become interested in family medicine research?
Probably the interest goes a long way back. During residency, I did a resident research project when it wasn't required. And these days, if most residents could get out of having to do a project, they would. And back then, there were only a few of us who did them. But I had an interest, and I did one. So it probably goes way back. My interest in research and asking and answering questions about the things that we see in family medicine.
Okay. Can you tell us a bit about your chief areas of research right now?
My chief area of research is family medicine, which is very general, but the thing about family medicine and primary care is it's a generalist specialty in a sense. So it's not like if I were a hematologist, it would all be about blood-related things. So consequently, if you look at my CV, you'll see things ranging all the way from growth charts in Inuit children to hypertension, cardiovascular things, to health services research, very broad, diabetes, and so my focus, if there's a focus, has to do more, at least recently it's developed into that, is more a methodology that I use. And the methodology, the research methodology I've used most of the time in the past 10 to 15 years is pragmatic randomized trials in community practices, for family practices. And so, in other words, studying interventions using a randomized controlled trial methodology. The interventions have varied quite a bit, from hypertension to diabetes to, although it's mainly been those two things, but health coaching, I've got one in now, care of the elderly, but it's always been, the methodology has been to go into physicians' practices, which are the laboratory for our research in family medicine, and through the practices identify potential participants in the study and randomize them, either cluster randomized, where the whole practice gets randomized, or individually randomized. But always it's been in family physicians' practices that I've focused it, and it's always about questions that are, and interventions that are important to primary care, family medicine. It's not drug trials or trials of devices or anything like that. It's other types of interventions. And so that's really, my focus has been that methodology, and using that methodology, studying a lot of the things that are happening and the things that we do in family medicine.
Okay. What are some of the challenges in the kind of research that you do and in the process?
Yeah, well, I mean, getting funding for research is always a challenge, but as you get more experienced at it and get further along and become known, it becomes a little easier. So I've done fairly well in the past 10 years of my career compared to the first 15 or 20 with regards to funding. The other challenge, always recruiting people into studies is a challenge.
Why is that?
Well, not everyone wants to. Number one, recruiting physicians. Some want to be involved or interested in helping out, some aren't. And even those that are, sometimes the way we try and get them to get patients for us is difficult. Some patients want to be involved, some don't. So you always have to build a long enough timeline into our research projects, the protocol, to make sure you've got enough time to enroll the number of people that's required for the study. But those patient recruitment, participant recruitment, and finding funding, those are, I think, the two. The other thing is, I think it's less so now, but over the years it has been, getting support from within the family medicine departments for research and being supportive of it. That's less now. It's become more and more accepted that research is an important component, and the chairs of family medicine are supportive of it, and the deans, especially if the dean is a family physician, as in my case right now, it is, and that's made an incredible difference to my ability to function and the support that I've had. think that's it with regards to.
Okay. Was there a research study outcome that really surprised you? Or that you didn't expect, a situation that sort of threw you off?
Not really. Sometimes we anticipate that a particular intervention, for instance, that you're studying is going to have an effect, and it turns out it doesn't have as much of an effect as you think. And I guess probably one study that we did looking at the use of the BP True machine, automated blood pressure measurement device, and really comparing it to ambulatory monitoring, the 24-hour ambulatory monitoring, and the degree of correlation between the two was striking to the point where that particular study has been used as one or two or three studies that's really said that 5 readings on the BP True device correlates really well with a full 24-hour monitoring, and so as provided good evidence for the use of automated office blood pressure measurement in diagnosing and following hypertension in the office. That's probably, I didn't expect it would be, the correlation would be as good as it turned out to be with that. Nothing else comes to mind right now. You hear about the eurekas in research. Well, think about when you're doing health services research, that sort of thing. It's the eureka. The letters in the word eureka are a year or two apart, right? It doesn't happen all at once. You sort of build an understanding around a certain area, and it's not suddenly a great discovery that's going to save lives and change the world, but just developing an understanding of something over a period of time from continually studying it and looking at things. So it's a very long drawn out eurekas is what we get in family medicine.
Okay. What is the most rewarding aspect of doing family medicine research?
I think it's rewarding for those people who enjoy that process, who enjoy asking questions and putting together a design of a study, carrying out the study, and then getting results. And I think if that's your inclination, if your inclination is to be that sort of person, then being able to get through it, being able to get funding for it, the recognition of peers that yes, this is a useful sort of thing, and then getting it published. The whole process is, I find, rewarding. And it's, there's frustrations as well. For instance, the last grant I got funded, it was the 4th submission to CIHR, right? So you have to stick with it. That's that persistence needs to be there, and sometimes that can be wearing. And, so you need a tough skin because rejection is much more common than acceptance, but after a while you get used to it. Same way with publications, right? You send things off, it gets rejected, or you've got to make major changes, and you just have to get used to that process. So, but in the end, the process, both for publication and for grant reviews, it improves the final product. So, despite the fact that it's frustrating and it's one rejection after another, eventually what you've got is a better product. So, the process works. Just you feel like screaming sometimes, but in the end, the process works.
Well, I know that you write novels and you've written medical volumes. It sounds like a bit of the same thing between editing a volume of fiction and editing and reiterating, reworking through your proposal submissions.
It is. It's similar, of course. A medical article is much shorter than a work of fiction or a medical book or whatever, but the number of times you have to go through things. This is even on your own before you even send it out to someone for an official look at it. I find myself rereading and editing and changing it, the structure of the sentence. And every single time you read it, you find a typo. And how did I miss it before? I hate typos. I really do. So then I get, if it's a novel or whatever, I'll get my wife to read it. She finds typos. How come I didn't see those typos? Get my son to read it. More typos. Anyway, eventually, though, you get them all, or maybe there's one left. In my first novel, one crept in. There was one there, and it sticks out as like a big sore thumb every time I read that paragraph.
Who were your mentors in family medicine research?
Family medicine research in Canada, there's been a small group of us over the years. It's enlarged over time, but I think we all sort of helped each other, and we get involved in what was originally the National Research Committee, and then the section of researchers, and so you learn from your peers and from others. To a large extent, it's that sort of mentoring, that sort of group mentoring, peer mentoring that I think happens a lot. But I think my biggest growth was when I went to Queen's. I was at Memorial, and I was the research director there, and and I was sort of probably the one most experienced in research, even though I really had no training at that point, and I just had the interest and the willingness just to do it. But there was no one there really to serve as a mentor to a large extent. But when I went to Queen's, there were a number of people there who were definitely involved in research, and I mean people like Walt Rosser, who came sort of a bit after I arrived there. Certainly was one. Ruth Wilson, who was the chair at the time that I was hired, and Ron Lees. Ron Lees is a great fellow there into research, and so there were a number of people like that. Jeff Hodgetts, and Jeff and I were sort of on about the same level, but we again was almost this peer mentoring type thing that we did, and so I would say that, and also at Queen's I did my master's in epidemiology, so I sort of gained some experience there as well, but. It was that whole change in emphasis and focus and importance of research at Queen's that wasn't at Memorial at the time that really sort of that whole situation was a mentoring situation for me, I think. And subsequently I've gone back to Newfoundland and tried to bring the same sort of presence and the same thing there. And I think it's helped where we've got a number of people who are involved in research now, and so the mentee has become the mentor for other people. It's what's supposed to happen as you get older, I think. Become successful.
So I understand that residents now have to do a research project, or will soon.
Oh yeah, they pretty much right across the country. Everyone has to do a residence project. In some departments, it has to be research. In other departments, it can be research, or it can be creative writing, or it can be other types of projects. But it's pretty much across the board. There's a required project, and a lot of those are research. And so a big part of our job is to, as research directors and other people who are involved in research in the different departments, is to try and help those residents get to understand what research is and get their projects done.
How do you bring new researchers in? The young family doctor who maybe doesn't indicate an innate curiosity like you had. How do you encourage them to participate?
What's it called? The trans. Anyway, there's this theory of where people are either in pre-contemplative, contemplative, or acting with regard, like quitting smoking. If someone is pre-contemplative and they're actually had no intent, they haven't thought about quitting smoking, very difficult to get them to change. If they're in the stage where it's contemplative, they're thinking about it, maybe they should, then actually an intervention at that point will help and might move them along. A lot of residents are permanently and will always be in the pre-contemplative stage. They will not consider research, and they don't want to, and that's fine. We don't all have to be researchers. So I think so that's one of the downsides to requiring residence projects. We're forcing something on people who they aren't that interested in doing. But if someone has an inkling, has an interest, then I think being supportive and talking to them, because they'll often come to us and say, well, I've got to do a project, but I don't know what to do, and so just working through the process. Well, how do you come up with ideas? And to say, look, think about the next 10 patients you see, and are there things about it that you could actually do a research project on? Some questions that could be generated from that particular clinical encounter. So give them strategies for coming up with questions, and help them out with methodologies. They don't know how they might answer a particular question once they have it, and that sort of thing. So with residents, you often have to bring them through it. And I mean, there are some who are very interested, and they come to you and they have an idea, and they may have a master's, and they have some idea about research methodology, and you can sort of work with them at a higher level. You work at the level that they're at. And same way with faculty members, because I mean, it varies across the country the degree to which a particular department is oriented towards research or have faculty members who do research. I think every department has fantastic teachers, academics who are in the section of teachers camp, sort of thing, and so we all do that. But some of them want to do research, but again, don't really know how to get started. And one of the things that when I moved back to St. John's in 2005 and set up the primary healthcare research unit was to try and identify people who are interested in research and get them involved. And it's not just the young ones. There was one faculty member who she'd fantastic teacher, clinician, working in academic family medicine all of her life. In her 50s, always wanted to do research. She dabbled in some. We got working on things, and within a couple of years, she had a CIHR grant and was doing so now she's one of our stars. And I know there's another person, a guy who's sort of interested, and he's just plodding along, and we've worked with him, and so you work with the people who have the interest and who want. There's a couple of other faculty members who quite openly say, they really aren't interested. They're fantastic teachers, fantastic clinicians, even good at generating research ideas, but really don't want to take it beyond that. Mm-hmm. And that's fine too. If we were all the same, it wouldn't be a very fun place to be. Mm-hmm. So we work with those people who are interested and who sort of come forward and say, this is what we want. We have general faculty development as well, so that everyone has some level, because in an academic faculty, there's an expectation that there be publications, and often publications comes from research, but that's not the only source. So it's anyway, we're I think having something like most departments have now, the primary healthcare research unit at Memorial. It's a resource for the whole faculty and for those people who want to build, and we're doing very well that way.
How will research of the future be different than when you started research?
The future's here. There, was that profound?
Yeah.
Anyways, well, when I started out, and when most of people in my cohort started out, the likelihood of getting significant funding from something like what was then the Medical Research Council, which has now become the CIHR, was very, very low. I mean, it was mainly basic science type research. We were lucky at Queen's. We did get one, actually, one funded grant. But what's changed is, I think, over the years, and this has just been really the past 2 or 3 years, especially at CIHR, is the recognition of primary care and primary care research as a legitimate field of study, worthy of funding. And so there have been a number of initiatives that for funding primary care research, and the current large one is the team grant competition. The deadline has come. There's teams all across Canada have submissions in. We're waiting for the answers. So it's large group, team-based type things. we've always been, I think, in family medicine, collaborative. Very rare one person puts in a grant just by themselves. It's often a team of at least 5 or 6 people. But this is larger scale. This is big. So, so that future, in a sense, has come, that recognition. One of the things back in 2000, 1999, 2000, I was chair of the section of researchers executive at the time. CIHR was just being formed, and we made the case for an institute of primary care research, which didn't go anywhere. But I think that would be the ultimate if we could get that and have a place within CIHR that funded primary care research. You know, you got to use this primary care, primary health care, family medicine thing. It's one big. The language is important. If we say family medicine, we'll never get an institute. We have to say primary care or even primary health care, and but the largest component of people, I think, doing primary care research is certainly family physicians. But anyway, so I think the future is working towards something like that, working towards maintaining the momentum we have now with regards to what CIHR is doing in funding. And mixed methods are a big thing where you combine both quantitative methods and qualitative methods. Just about every proposal I've put in for the past 5 years has been a mixed methods proposal. So from a methodological perspective, that's something that's important.
How will knowledge translation support research in the future? Has become, I understand, a part of every proposal submission as required by the CIHR.
Yeah. And there's, I mean, the days of even basic science research not having to recognize that, even though they may not even know at the time when they're doing it, that there is some application down the road. In other words, to move the knowledge that we gain through research along to the point where it can be used by the people who have to apply that knowledge in patient care and so forth, or in health policy, or in health administration, or whatever. The days of that not being important and not having to make that connection are gone. And so with every grant now, we have to talk about, how these findings that we will have from this, how are they going to be translated into the next level, and what you have to have a plan for it. And you can't just say, I'm going to publish it in a journal. You have to. It has to be more than that. So that's become a very important thing, and it's, in a sense, it's a field in its own, and there are people now who have expertise in knowledge translation and knowledge synthesis and this sort of thing. So it's something that certainly primary care, family medicine has to be part of, because we're, to a large extent, we're the final recipients of that and using it to care for our patients. The other recipients are the policymakers and the administrators who have to sort of try and make their decisions based on evidence as much as they can.
What will be the big questions for primary care research, family medicine research in the next 20 years?
I think really sorting out what the best structure for delivering care is. It's going to be more that sort of health services research, healthcare delivery type things. There's so many things happening in Canada now. The primary care networks in Alberta and the family medicine groups and networks and teams and things in Ontario and many other different models and exactly what's the best way to deliver care. So that and research around the interdisciplinary care, the patient medical home is all part of that as well. So I think research in that area will be important. There's so much information now that's been gained from tertiary care situations that we apply in primary care, because that's where it came from, and sometimes it doesn't always translate well. So perhaps even redoing some of those things, or doing them in effectiveness studies as opposed to efficacy studies, which is what's often done in tertiary care, and saying, okay, you can't always just take this information and put it into the application in primary care. So we need to study just, yes, it may be efficacious, but is it effective when applied in primary care? And so bringing the information along one step more, so that evidence then can be used in our guidelines rather than just the efficacy evidence that we're using now.
Okay. What advice would you share with someone who's planning a career in family medicine research or primary care research?
That it's a long, hard struggle, that you need to have a tough hide, there's going to be rejections from your proposals, both at the university and provincial and federal levels. Your initial impression is that editors at journals are really crappy people, and the reviewers couldn't possibly have read your article because you already said that, and there's going to be frustrations and emotions and anger and things. But if you're really interested, persist, stick with the questions that you want answered, and get a mentor or work with people. Put together teams. You can't do research on your own. This case that I talked about, the senior faculty member who suddenly became a researcher, she had the idea. She was a PI in the grant, but someone with more experience was a co-PI, and sort of connecting with people and putting together a team, so that the reviewers at CIHR, initially she was sort of by herself, and they sort of said there's not enough experience here to do this. Great question, and then when she sort of changed the team and reformatted things a bit, then she got funded, because it's the whole team that's looked at. And so don't be afraid to collaborate.